Hey everybody, welcome back to day 17 of ELUL New Light Activation. The king is in the field. It's time for us to complete the past, to rectify whatever needs rectification, and to prepare for a new light, a new world when Rosh Hashanah comes in. Once that happens, we still have to unfold it in our lives, but it's like, somebody once gave me an example. It probably actually comes from the Torah, but if you're, those shopping shows, do you ever see one of those shopping shows, shopping contests where somebody gets a cart and they have like 30 seconds or 2 minutes, whatever, to run and grab whatever they can? So once they get home, they have to see, unpack, see what it is, what's really useful, is something missing. But the idea is that we want to use the time as powerfully as we can. So we're moving this week up north. A little bit mixed feelings about it. I really want to do it, but this is Jerusalem. So anyway, it's topsy-turvy and there's a lot to do, and we don't actually have a mover booked yet. So I'm going to try to keep this quite brief, but I want to talk about identity today because it's really, really huge. Let's see if I can get that into the frame. So this white board, imagine it stretches out into infinity in all directions. That's your potential. Inside that potential, I want you to see this odd-looking figure as a valve, a kind of valve through which the potential has to flow through. So it's not just the size of the valve that matters, that controls how much flows through, but it's also the shape of the valve. So let's say these indentations might be where you got, where you were embarrassed or you were humiliated, or where you tried something and you failed, and then it becomes part of your identity that, I'm a person who, forget it. I can't, speak on stage. I can't, whatever, run a marathon. I can't. And then when you have things successes that will create a bulge in the identity, basically in that filter, in that valve, so that where that similar type of situation exists, there's a lot of space for the potential to come through. So it's really how constricted are you in what areas, how expansive, how much space do you have to move in, and in what particular areas. And all of that is going to be controlled by your identity. What's your identity? Sometimes we call it the ego, but ego has pretty much of a negative kind of reputation. So ego is sometimes, the arrogance, to be egotistical or whatever, but I'm not talking about that here. The ego-based identity is your sense of self. It's what you develop as you grow. A newborn baby doesn't have that sense of self. The newborn baby's whole world is the mother, the parents, the sensations, the feelings. It's at a certain point in life when that little voice begins to really develop and really take over. I guess it has a lot to do with the development of language and language-based awareness. But anyway, that little voice that keeps speaking to us, giving us opinions about what's good, what's not good, what we like, what we don't like, and most importantly, how we're doing. Most of the time, your inner little voice is telling you or asking you, actually, it asks a lot of questions like, am I okay? What did I do wrong? Do people look at me funny? Is there something wrong with me? What's wrong with me? So a lot of times it's questions like that. And then their answers, their opinions, and those opinions get very fixed. Just like this picture, it's not just generally, those things are, part of, like I keep saying, keep repeating that they say that 95% of the thoughts that we have are thoughts that we have frequently, that they're completely repetitive, meaning they're wired in their default. So a lot of this is around the identity. So if you have an opinion about yourself, likewise, if you have opinions about others or the world, but since you're living with yourself and most of the time that little voice is talking about you or asking about you, or even when it's commenting on other people, it might be like, I'm chubbier than her, I'm thinner than her, I'm, smarter, I'm stupider, I wish I looked like that, or, whatever it is, it's comparison reality. So the identity is made up also. It's not just that it's made up of the little voice. It's not just that it's a filter around your potential or a valve through which your potential must express, but it's mostly made of comparisons. So it's like, how did I do compared to how I should have done? Because when a little kid starts to walk, they're not thinking about, that they don't have that identity. Like, oh, why did I fall? I'm probably not meant to walk. I'll never be any good at this. Look, my big brother is already walking. It looks easy for him. What's wrong with me? So that gets developed again. Doesn't take that long after we're born, but it's, you know, not the first year. But anyway, so we're comparing ourselves to other people, to the way we think we should be, it should be, how we should have performed. And that's where those are the things that form the identity. When we can pin something in its place and have an opinion about it. So if you can change your identity, obviously, if you're limited, if your potential needs to flow through that valve, and if you are limited by the shape of it, by, you know, the little voice controlled and the inner wiring controlled opinions about yourself, what's possible for you, what's not, what is safe for you, what's not, what you're capable of, what you're not, you know, how good you are, how worthwhile you are or not, whether you're the type of person who, I'll tell you a quick story. It's a pretty profound story. Very simple, but very profound. So there was a time about 12 years ago, 15, I don't remember, sometime in the first 10 years of 2020, I'd have to figure it out. But anyway, there was a time when I was going to buy a car. My car broke down. I needed to buy a car. And my friend asked me, what's most important? What's most important to me in a car? And I bought a Chevette when my first car was like this little old Chevette. And then, you know, we had parents who gave us their used cars a couple of times. So anyway, then we bought one car, probably wasn't the best purchase. But anyway, so I started asking myself, what would I want in a car? And the only thing that I could think of that, I know it sounds probably really silly, but it's deep. And you'll see that it's deep. The only thing I could really think of that I really, really wanted was very emotional for me. I wanted leather seats. I had a friend who had leather seats, and it just looked so luxurious. But you see, when I told my friend who asked me, she actually had leather seats, that I would love leather. Obviously, I want to run well and good gas mileage, but other than that, I really want leather seats. But I know that I'm just not a leather seat type of a person. Like, I had in my identity that leather seats aren't for me. Like, they're just not for me. And I was sad about it. It was all in my head, you know. I hadn't looked at any cars or whatever. We were financially strapped somewhat, but we were still going to buy something. Anyway, so my husband suggested that I go to the dealership and drive, you know, a car, like a certain type of car with leather seats. And I was like, I can't, I'm not really going to buy it. It's not right. He said, just go. That's what people do. Just go test drive it. So anyway, I went to the dealership, and they showed me a silver Honda Odyssey with leather seats and sliding electric doors. And I got in it. I didn't want to touch it because I wasn't a leather seat type of person. It wasn't for me. I couldn't have something like that identity. But I drove it around. And then when I left, another couple came in and they got in the car. And I said to myself, I'm being very blunt here because this is how it works. So anyway, I said to myself, those people, you know, they could probably legitimately get a car like this. And I felt, you know, add to the feeling that I didn't warrant the car, add a feeling of, you know, just add to it. So anyway, that was a very pivotal experience. I came home and I told my husband what had happened. And as I said, we were strapped, but he managed somehow to go out and find a special deal on a used but looks like new silver Honda Odyssey with leather seats and sliding electric doors. And when that car came into my world, I'm not saying it has to be like, this is just a random example. It doesn't have to be about things you buy or whatever, but that car changed my life. Not only because I loved it. It was one of the few things I felt really bad about leaving America, actually, but because it wasn't in my identity, and yet it came into my life. Now, I wasn't able to bring it into my life, but my husband did, and the fact that he had me go test drive it actually had me touch it, actually had me sit there. Again, not about cars, but what is it in your life that really matters to you? Like, let's pretend that you're buying, you know, a new year, not just looking at a car. What is it that really matters to you? What kind of person, what experience would you like to have on a spiritual level? What relationship would you like to have with God? Ani ladodi vidodi li, I am to my beloved is to me. In the whole month of Elul, God is sitting, is standing in the field where we are, in our dimension, beckoning to us out of love. Come, approach me with love, open your heart. I'm here on a new level. We can change the past. We rectify, that's why it's so important in Elul to rectify the past, to fix whatever was an out projection or an outgrowth of your previous identity that isn't working for you or others, to complete whatever wasn't completed so that it can be new, so that you can choose from zero, not based on this thing. It's very limiting, very distorting. So there's that possibility. That's the possibility that Elul brings. That's really the energy that Elul brings. Tonight is Chai Elul. It's still daytime here, even, and certainly in America. So Chai Elul is the 18th of Elul. Today's the 17th. Chai Elul is the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. He was born, I think, in 1698. And then in 1740 something, the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, was born also on Chai Elul, on the 18th of Elul. Chai, 18 in Gematria, in Hebrew numerology, spells, can be read Chai. 18 is a Yud and a Ches. If you reverse it, it's Chai, which means life. So the 18th of the month, the life of the month, is the life force of that month. So on the day of Chai Elul, tonight, this ability and the urgency of working on these vessels, of approaching the king who's standing in the field out of love, in a love relationship, even if you don't know how, even if you're wounded, even if that's part of your identity, that God doesn't care for you, or that, or that life doesn't work for you, or whatever. Bring your broken heart to the king who's in the field and talk it out. Talk it out from your heart. So it's the life force of the month, and the remaining 12 days starting tonight are supercharged with this energy, and actually they correspond to the 12 months of the year that passed. But you don't have to really worry about the technical aspects of what day corresponds to when or whatever. It's really about what year would you like to have? What year would you like to create? What kind of relationships do you want to be in? How do you want your identity to change? Are you happy with it in every aspect? Or is there something that you can shift? There's something that you would like to shift, some new way that you'd like to be around yourself and your life. And it starts by bringing in the pain, the wounded heart in an open way to God as a beloved. Ask for help. There's intimacy possible now, and it's up to you to step in if you want to. So if your identity is keeping you from doing that, step into that intimacy with your identity. In other words, just be really honest. Like if you've ever had to start a conversation that's very difficult and you were scared, with whether it's public speaking or you're scared of speaking to an individual or whatever, you might have discovered that if you can say to the person, I'm very nervous about this, I'm very nervous to share myself now, so please listen to me gently, or please, like be supportive. When you do that, it opens up the channel. It's called breaking the ice, but it opens a channel to an authentic flow of expression from yourself. Once you do that, what's happening? You're literally, I'll show you my silly picture again. When you start that flow by speaking what the limitation is with the intent to move beyond it, now you've opened something. Now you've created an opening into your potential. So there's a lot, obviously, to say about this. Changing the identity can be a big project, an ongoing project. It's beyond the scope of this short live, but I want to bring it up, and most importantly, in your relationship with God. If you're willing to have a different relationship with God, and you don't know if you can, and you don't know if it's safe, and you don't know how you feel about it, and you don't know if you're worthy, whatever it is you've got going on, bring that into the conversation in a most authentic way, and know that as you do, you're breaking the boundary of the identity and opening to something new. What's going to happen in that something new? Out here in the white space, it's unpredictable because it didn't happen yet, because there's no mold, there's no template. The closest you can get to the template is, what do you desire? And then when you know what you desire, then you can align yourself with it. You can ask, align your thoughts, speech, and action, your soul's garments, with what you desire to bring into your life and into the world, and then you can allow for it and notice it. You can keep asking. The amount of intimacy, what happened when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil was there was a fall. As we all know, there was a breaking. There was a breaking of authentic flow of self, to the point where when God said, Ayeka, where are you? They didn't answer at first because they were hiding, because they were ashamed. So that snake energy, that was a result of the urging of the snake, the cunning, seductive snake, the deceitful snake, that snake energy, as I call it, remains in our psyche, and it creates a veil. You could look at this, I won't hold it up again, but the board again, you could look at the identity as a veil, not only disconnecting you from your potential, but disconnecting you from God, disconnecting you from an awareness of divine love when it does. And that veil is made up in large part of shame and fear. So we're afraid. We're afraid of having to think of ourselves. Mostly, we're afraid of having to see ourselves in a bad light. That's a fear that is probably in some cases stronger than even a fear of death. Fear of things not being the way we think they are is extremely threatening to the identity. I'll say one more thing about it. This thing, this template, this valve, pretend I read you the liner. So it doesn't actually exist. It's made up of the little voice. It's made up of the unconscious wiring and the unconscious voice and the conscious voice. So all the things you think about yourself, all the things, the opinions about you that are wired into your system. So it doesn't actually have an intrinsic being. Your ego doesn't exist. This is what's the right word? It exists as a functioning, as a function. Kind of like almost more like a verb than a noun. But your soul exists, your body exists, they're real. Your ego, your identity is made up of blah, 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 even if that's not actually in words. So when something threatens it, even if it's something good, like you've probably heard that we all have a ceiling when it comes to a wealth ceiling. So when we get, too strapped, we'll do something, we'll get our acting gear and we'll do something to raise that, when we get to the floor, we'll raise ourselves off the floor because we don't want to stay there. But likewise, when we get too comfortable, when there's an opportunity that is too in conflict with the identity, we'll do something to, you spend too much or whatever. It's known that when people win the lottery, within a couple of years, they're back in the same situation that they were, because that's the identity. So the identity, being that it has no real existence on its own, it's not a soul, it's not a body, it's just made, it's a construct. It's a function, an active function that keeps reconstructing itself by its opinions. When an opinion changes, or when something, you look in the mirror, good or bad, and something is too confronting to the identity, it feels like the threat of death. It really does. If you don't believe me, think about having to go and admit that you're wrong in an argument with somebody that you feel dominated by, if you were wrong. It can really feel like a threat of death. Doing things, taking action on what you truly want when you're not sure how it's going to turn out, that can feel like a threat of death. Like people will go through their whole lives not trying for what they want because they don't know if it's going to work. Think about it. It's not logical, though I think almost all of us do that. Almost all of us hold that pattern. It's not logical because what have you got to lose? What have you got to lose? Your identity, your sense of self. So you want to become as masterful as possible about identity and about how to, again, master it and not have it master you. So you have to be smart, understand what it's made of, get used to connecting more and more with your deeper, authentic self. Again, Ani Ladodi Dododi Li, the king is in the field. That's where you want to reach out authentically into dialogue with the creator in a very real way. Totally real, hold nothing back. Don't fake anything. Don't pretend to be loving when you're angry. Don't pretend to be confident when you're not. Don't pretend to be spiritual when you feel dried out. Just bring it all into the conversation. What I didn't say is when this veil This separation dropped into the human consciousness when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It created a separation. I started to say it, but it created a separation of fear and shame between us and the Creator, so that Adam and Eve, instead of saying, whoa, whoopsie, we listened to this like snake and we ate from this tree and you told us not to, and we feel so scared now and so horrible. We don't know what to do and we don't know how to get back and we feel naked. If that had happened, game over. But it didn't. They hid. They were ashamed. And instead of being upfront about it, instead of bringing it into the relationship, they tried to hide it, and then when confronted, they tried to blame. Assuming that you know the story. God said, where are you? What happened? Why did you eat from the tree? Adam said, it wasn't me, it was the snake, it was the woman you gave me. And then he said, it wasn't me, it was the snake. So all this paradigm, you know, the interposition of shame, of fear, of guilt, of blame, of judgment, all this stuff, it's all part of the identity. It's all being reinforced continuously by the little voice, which does get wired into the unconscious. It's not only the words that are being said in your head, but it's what's generating them. And this, most of all, is keeping us from authenticity, from an authentic relationship with ourselves, with all of ourselves, and with our Creator. So if you can open that, and that's the fairy dust for today, to be in dialogue, to have a conversation with God. Even if you're not sure if you believe in God, I didn't used to believe in God. Talk to Him about it. Hold nothing back. And even be aware that even in the mere action of communicating authentically, you're beyond your identity, that veil of separation that's made up of shame and judgment and guilt and fear and all of that stuff is open during that conversation. And the more you can keep it open, the more you can expand it open, the more new pieces of your potential and new love and support from that divine relationship is going to come through. There's so much more to say about this, but I'll leave it here for now. So dialogue with the Creator, that's your fairy dust. If you feel up to it, I'd like to hear, people aren't really posting so much. A few people have what you're experiencing when you do the fairy dust. So the right place to post that would be under this video on the Release Your Soul Light page. Would love to hear what happens for you. Okay, everybody, happy ELUL. May your true self shine forth starting now. Take care.